So what we're trying to show you is some of the skills and while we kind of talk about how we function on our homestead, because I know a lot of people get frustrated. They look at it and they say it's expensive, which I didn't really understand what expensive was until I started traveling the country and living in other parts of the country away from my homestead. And then the, $150 a month that I spent in all of my feed and purchasing animals and watering supplies, everything that went into my homestead really topped out at about $150. And that was when we were first starting out. It wasn't when we were actually established and we had fences. So last night, Catherine came in just as I was getting ready for bed with the kids, and she said, should I lock the milk goat up? And so the reason she came in and said that was that you have options with your milk animals. A lot of people think, I can't go on vacation, I have to milk 3 times a day if I have a goat, and what am I going to do with all that milk? And a cow would be out of the question because of that. So something that anybody who's had animals long, or milk animals long enough, you figure out tricks.
Right. So, well, this is, the goat came to us originally in milk, so I was tied to the twice a day milking, and it becomes quite the chore. So currently I have kids on all my does that are in milk, and so I now have the option to, if I want milk and we need milk, I pen my mom overnight so that she builds up her milk supply. If we are doing fine and our fridge is full of milk, I leave her with the kid and he takes care of her and I don't have to worry about milking. So him being on her has afforded me a bunch of freedom.
Well, and it means that if you have a neighbor who can come do the rest of the chores, but they're not familiar with milking, or you have a really temperamental doe, you can just stick those babies on the doe the whole time you're gone, and then somebody isn't overwhelmed with saying, yeah, I can take care of chickens, but I'm not interested in milking this goat.
Yeah, my kids will gladly take care of all of our small animals. They will not milk for me.
Right, and my husband doesn't milk for me. It's hard for him to crouch down over the goat, and it makes his hands hurt.
Certainly my generation, and definitely my children's generation, if we're not keeping these kids alive, they are gone. They will be lost.
Well, and I think one of the misconceptions we have of women's work is that women's work was not physical traditionally. And the truth is, women's work was incredibly physical traditionally, and it's only recently that we've really thought of women's work and housework as kind of conjoined at the hip, and that's all it is. Traditionally, the women would have been making all the clothing,
right?
But they also would have been doing the gardening. They would have been doing a lot of the butchering, especially the small animals.
Yeah.
They would have helped in the harvesting. And I think if we can give women more confidence in their ability to figure problems out,
right?
Whether it be family needs, everybody who's ever had a milk animal has figured out that, I could just leave the babies on for this part. Or, hey, we've got too much milk. Oh, well, I guess we need a pig.
Right.
And so, in my opinion, a homestead solves so many problems all at the same time that would generally need to be paid for with money.
Oh, Gypsy says, speaking of keeping traditions alive, I'm making Irish beer bread while watching you.
Oh, fun.
Yay. So, Renee says, rabbit manure is the best. Amen.
I would say just open it up like that.
Okay.
And then when you actually get ready to spin it, it'll be easier.
Okay.
Well, and I think what it really comes down, the strength of homesteading is using what you have on hand to create something that feeds your family. I mean, bottom line, whatever you have, for our first year, what I used for mulch because I didn't have money was I went out and cut my weeds down, and I just left them where they were.
I've done that.
And it works.
Yep.
It works.
Learned it from you, and I was out there with scissors and thinking
know,
about you
awful.
with your adrenal burnout.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Julie would get on me.
Right. You do. You have to be the right tool. The right tool is what saves your body so that you can still do it in 40 years. What saved us there was I was literally out cutting down alfalfa that had come up volunteer in our pastures, and I was laying it down for mulch so that I could rejuvenate my pastures because they didn't have any soil on them.
Yeah, we have no soil here.
Yeah,
either.
no soil. In an arid area, it's hard to build topsoil.
Yeah.
It just blows away.
It does.
Along
with everything else.
And along with everything, and you love it, but there are certain places where you want it to actually be fertile. You want it to grow something that needs water.
Yes.
And fertilizer. And so the tool that I bought at that point was I had been using scissors to cut my weeds down because I couldn't start a weed whacker. The gas-powered one was just too hard for me. And so when we got our next tax return, we went and got an Austrian scythe. We found them at the Scythe Connection, scytheconnection.com.
I've checked them out. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. They have amazing articles there, and it cost me almost $400 to get the kit.
I've got questions for you in regard to that, because we, just like you, were all rock.
Right.
And somebody told me that scythes are not good if you have rocky land. Have you had issues with that?
If you're not watching what you're doing, you will ding and nick your blade.
Okay.
But you have a peening kit that comes with it, so that and the peening kit actually reshapes your blade.
Oh.
So unless you get something really hard and it actually rips your blade,
Okay.
You're fine.
Okay.
And it depends on which blade you need. There are blades that can actually cut down a small tree.
So you are way faster than I am. Is this okay? Could you spin off of it?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. And how is this?
That looks good too.
Okay. I'm improving.
Fantastic. The most important thing is to be hands-on. It doesn't mean go spend a ton of money on whatever tool you get. Start with what you can afford, which can be free. You can make a drop spindle out of a pencil and a potato. And then you can move on to one that costs $12 on Etsy. And then so when it comes down to, a lot of people look at it and they're like, well, I can't afford a scythe. I can't afford to put up the fencing for my goats.
Rabbit hutches. When we started, we bought all the material for our first hutch, and it cost, I think, $350.
Yeah.
And I told Joe, I said, there is nothing
Never
sustainable
again.
about this.
Never again.
We can't afford to do this. So we started repurposing. We tracked down pallets, heat-treated pallets. And I told Julie when they were here a year and a half ago that she's probably going to call us the pallet people. Because our rabbit hutches, our pig pen, our goat house, our chicken coop, pretty much everything we have in our backyard, the lumber we sourced out of pallets. So we're now at a point where we're making these 3-foot by 8-foot grow-out hutches, and they're decent, right?
They're amazing.
For less than, well, I think it's right around $40 is what we're paying per hutch.
Well, and that's the important thing, is you have to understand when you're homesteading or doing anything prepper, is that it's in your home, it's on your property, your animals are going to destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly than that, your first 2 tries are going to fail. However you built it, you're going to find that you wanted to do it differently.
Yep.
So, for instance, when we were in Tulsa, it cost me $500 to get the materials for the rabbit hutches that I built. The reason I did that was because I wanted to show you how to do it the right way. And because a lot of people look at it and they want it to look a particular way. And if you don't buy it new, you can't make it look that way. Unless you have, the carpentry skills of Zeus.
Right.
And so so when you guys bought t-shirts, that's where that money went for, was that we went and we built the really primo rabbit hutches. And if you build a goat barn with brand new, you're going to look at $1,200.
Yeah.
And what's funny is they're just going to chew on it the same way they would have if you'd used pallets.
Oh, if you haven't had goats before, they rub on everything.
They do. And so when it comes down to being a homesteader, it's about, at least to my mind, it's about the result that ends up on your plate. And that doesn't mean to make it look untidy. Everything about Catherine's place looks tidy and it's beautiful.
Here, real quick, Jeff, this is backwards because of the camera. I actually have this turned around backwards for the camera. So the way you see it says farmhouse, to us it's backwards.
Uh-huh.
So nothing I can do about this.
And so it's why I use, for instance, I use pallets to build all my frames. Not necessarily, even though I have lumber out at my house, and because it's a dry, arid area, I have 30-year-old 2x4s that have dried out perfectly. They're just a little bit soft, and I use them for all sorts of building projects. But it's easier to use a pallet because it's already square, it's a uniform size, everything. It's like adult Legos. And so I use pallets because they fit everything. They fit with my tin that I went and harvested from my father-in-law's calf shed when it blew over. I went and harvested all the tin and saved it. And I used it on the inside of our off-grid cabin as the interior walls.
And it turned out beautiful.
It turned out good enough.
And I might be a little partial, but I love the pallet look. It looks so homesteady.
Well, I do. I like the pallet wood.
And I know that you can't, that's not applicable countrywide. I know that Deep South has mentioned before that anything wood that they do rots.
It does.
So in the high mountain desert, pallets are perfect. May not be perfect elsewhere.
Yeah, and so if for instance, instead you had a lot of rocks on your property and you felt like you could build structures out of rocks, or if you had a lot of clay on your property and you wanted to make adobe, I think God really opens your mind up when you start to look around and get into motion.
Agreed.
If you're in motion, then God can direct your feet. If you're standing still, you have your agency to just continue standing still. But when you take that first step of faith and you say, this is what I feel like I need to do for my family, then He can direct your feet.
I totally agree. I think growth happens when you're in movement and taking action. And my philosophy is diseases and cesspools happen in stagnant water.
Exactly. Which is why I like to listen to audiobooks instead of read, because to sit there and I'm always so depressed after I sit and just read a book, because I feel like, okay, what do I have to show for this last 3 hours?
I love to read. I've got this huge collection and I feel so unproductive sitting and reading.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we're going to call it quits and go feed our kids lunch.
I like it.
Sound good?
So thanks for joining us, guys.
Hey guys, so today the Pepper Preppers are going to make off-grid, grid down, no power biscuits, so that if you do not have a way to access an oven, you can still make the comfort foods that your family really craves. So what we're going to start off with first is, this is the book that we're going to be cooking from. It's Dining on a Dime, and it's about being frugal. But part of being frugal is being able to cook from scratch. If you're not having to buy a lot of boxed goods, then you're saving yourself a lot of money. And so everything from here is from scratch.
Okay, so I was all set up with my phone the other direction and now it wants me to turn it. So, ta-da! Okay.
And so today, doing baking powder biscuits, we're actually going to start off with a recipe that teaches you how to make your own baking powder. So if you already have the book, it's on, yes.
So I wanted to add that too. Baking powder has a limited shelf life. So if you're counting on storing, we buy it by bulk because we do a lot of cooking at home. In fact, we very rarely eat out. But baking powder will not store forever. It's not one of those indefinite items. So having this recipe in Tara's book is a godsend, because that way you are able to make your own on an as-needed basis.
What's that?
As far as food storage, that was something we wanted to discuss and we did not bring up, is that we have different dietary needs. And so your food storage is different than my food storage. And so we're not paleo, we're not gluten-free here. I'm not overly concerned about a whole lot of toxins in our diet because we're not super sensitive. So I just store regular all-purpose flour because it works for our family. That's how we knew our oven was dying, because it took us 4 hours to heat up to 350.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
Ouch, that's really hot. Okay, so I'm going to set a timer for 12 minutes, and I know that Catherine needs to go. My mom really likes Azure Standard. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit this in. Ow! So hot, so hot. Dining on a Dime biscuits in paleo form. Yeah, this is Mike's biscuits, but I turned them into paleo biscuits. Those are my biscuits. Oh, I'm making a mess. There's my biscuits. They're not too crumbly. They're just hot. So there we go. There's the biscuits. Okay, I'm going to go pop off. And if you guys like the show, make sure to share it, because we'd like to do this every week. And we're going to try and alternate between gardening shows and spinning shows and cooking shows and prepper shows. So we're doing all that. Make sure to see us in Mansfield, Missouri on the 6th and 7th. Can't wait to see you there. And I'm going to go eat my biscuit. Talk to you later.